Putin calls and complains to Trump, and as far as we can tell, Trump gives his silent consent for revenge against Ukraine. The American embassy warns Putin has completely refused to negotiate, and Elon Musk has openly and frankly gone against Donald Trump himself. The State Department has discovered the son-in-law of a Putin official who was very actively studying classified information. And in the US, some people are simply shocked by what Ukraine is actually doing. All this and more will be covered in today's episode with plenty of interesting details. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And let's get into it. So, what did we learn from the conversation between Putin and Trump, which lasted a full 75 minutes? Trump was the first to announce to the world that Putin would respond very decisively to any attack on Russian military airfields. But as for Putin himself, let me remind you, he didn't say anything about responding very decisively or anything like that. We'll get to what Putin actually said a bit later. In other words, Trump certainly did not condemn Putin's intention to respond to strikes on airfields, did not call on him to refrain from doing so, and did not threaten any sanctions. On the contrary, he actually called the conversation good, although he did admit that there would be no immediate peace. Look at that, how perceptive. But right after stating that there would be no immediate peace, he immediately switched to the topic of Iran, saying that Putin was even ready to act as a mediator in negotiations with Tehran. So this isn't just a conversation, it's, let's say, a tacit approval. Trump is making it clear that if Putin strikes, he won't interfere. Moreover, he starts talking about Putin as a mediator in Iran. And that means that in Trump's eyes, Putin is almost a diplomat now, not an aggressor. It's no longer some vague neutrality from Donald Trump, but rather a kind of soft support. A rhetoric in which, naturally, the one to blame isn't the aggressor, Putin, but the one who resists. Oh dear, naughty Ukraine. The fact is, sanctions really would have forced Putin to stop the war. The fact that he understands, or at least, if not him, then Nabiulina understands what these sanctions will lead to is also a fact. That's why it was very important for Putin to secure tacit consent for a massive retaliatory strike against Ukraine to ensure that there would be no sanctions afterwards. And apparently he got what he wanted. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. Putin is getting approval from Trump for strikes on Ukraine. And what's the next step? Tell me. Maybe the US will start providing coordinates for where to strike in Ukraine? Let me just remind you, Ukraine destroyed the planes that the US and the Russian Federation took from us in exchange for security guarantees and handed them over to Russia. And then, from those very same planes, Russia, completely disregarding all security guarantees in its attempt to seize a piece of our territory, launched missiles at us. So we burned those planes. Listen, I'm curious, does anyone read or listen to those die-hard Trump supporters? How are they explaining now the supposed genius of Trump's policy toward Ukraine? So do we just need to wait a little longer, or what? Is this some kind of brilliant multi-step strategy? How are they explaining now that Trump isn't imposing sanctions that would actually force that vile moth to end the war quickly? Just yesterday, someone commented under the episode about Crimea, about the Crimean Bridge, saying that they were always struck by the abnormal concentration of pensioners, these Stalinists in Sevastopol, which is where I'm from. I can confirm that's true. But sometimes it seems to me that Putin and Trump are like two stubborn old Stalinist grandpas, and they're trying to tell the free young generation, represented by Ukraine, that you have to do everything the way your elders say, that you young people have no rights, only obligations, and that talking back is punishable. And in general, Stalin is not on you. And honestly, if it were up to me, you'd all be sent to camps right now, shoot some, let the rest live there. It really feels like you're dealing with these Stalinist old men who say to each other, oh, can you imagine he talked back to his elders in the Oval Office. Can you believe what young people are like these days? Back in our day, there's no Stalin for them. Meanwhile, today, Putin is hitting Kherson with a club, striking the regional government administration right into the building. Why bother being shy about it now, right? He had a little chat with Trump and now he can get ready to strike Ukraine. And Trump pulled off another cynical move. After a conversation with Putin, he publishes a link to an article on his social network. Congress can give Trump leverage over Putin. Right after that conversation, this is what the Washington Post writes. And it says that the passage of the bill by Congress won't require Trump to sign the sanctions document, but it will give Trump leverage over Putin. So look at what he's doing. Quoting, Signing the bill does not mean that Trump must immediately impose sanctions. The proposed sanctions will only take effect after the president issues an official statement that Putin refuses to negotiate a peace agreement with Ukraine. You see, right? This gives Trump simply phenomenal opportunities and leverage over Putin. So after the conversation, he says, look, see how it is? I decide whether you want to talk or not. In other words, the sanctions are in my hands. Even if the Graham package passes Congress, it's all still in my hands. It demonstrates that this mechanism of punishment is his to control. He says, here it is, right here with me. So when he decides that Putin is behaving badly, that's when it will go through. And if he doesn't decide, then it's fine. So Putin, what are you offering so that I don't make that decision? Do you understand what he's doing? He's publishing this material to show that you, Putin, are in his hands. Well, basically, yes, friends. Now, I'll tell you more about the American embassy and how Russians partially thwarted this act of retribution. But for now, I ask you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And hit the bell if you're already subscribed. Let there be more of us. Let more people learn the truth. So the American embassy urged people to exercise caution due to the risk of significant airstrikes. I think you've heard about this. They didn't call for people to leave, as by the way. There have been times when they did say, leave Ukraine to their citizens. But here, it's just exercise caution. So it's clear that there's no talk of any nuclear strike. And not only for that reason, Putin would never in his life agree to this because he understands that he would be completely wiped out. So then, what about those statements that Trump would need 2 weeks to figure out whether Putin wants peace or not? After talking with Putin, Trump says that there won't be a quick peace. So it turns out that Putin doesn't want peace. Or about decisiveness. Remember, Trump said, then we will act by other means. So it turns out Trump was just talking big again, seems like it's happening a bit too often. As for the shelling, naturally, the savage will want to make a show, they have this thing for symbolism. He'll want to get the maximum number of long-range aviation aircraft in the air and launch missiles from them to show, like, you didn't burn anything here. See, they're all flying, and we'll strike you from there. And of course, they'll also launch caliber missiles from the Black Sea. And naturally, ballistic missiles as well. They've had some setbacks with their ballistic missiles. So they'll definitely want to show all of this. And now, I think in the Kremlin, they're quite confident that there won't be any sanctions at all for this particular strike, even though it could result in a large number of casualties. So that's how it is, it turns out. And then the hyaluronic aphid crawled out and said, who even negotiates with those who rely on terror? I find it very interesting. How did you come to power then? So the official definition of terrorism is intimidating the population through various attacks in order to exert pressure and force certain political decisions. How did you come to power at the end of the 90s? Wasn't it by intimidating people with apartment bombings? That's exactly how you came to power. Terrorism is what made you the president of the Russian Federation. And then you continued to hold on to that position using the same terrorism. So basically, the aphid crawled out and announced that it refuses to engage in high-level negotiations. The Kiev regime, I quote, already illegitimate as it is degenerating into a terrorist organization. He stated that he doubts the possibility of holding a summit with Ukraine or achieving a ceasefire in light of the recent attacks. Oh, would you look at that? Putin calls strikes on his own military airfields terrorism. Can you imagine? Let me remind you of that signature phrase of his, the one his image makers came up with to give him some toughness, to turn an unremarkable, servile little back carrier into some kind of dashing Chekist figure. And that phrase they came up with for him, we will hunt down terrorists everywhere and wipe them out in the outhouse. He said it right after the apartment bombings when the FSB was blowing up those buildings with Russian citizens inside. So it's clear what's going on. Russia is shifting the narrative. Russia isn't an occupier. Russia is defending itself from terrorists. Well, that's exactly why there won't be any negotiations or anything like that. Don't you think it's already an utterly shameful story to whine about your planes being destroyed after you attacked Ukraine? I mean, it's just so disgraceful. And you know what they were doing? In order to prevent satellite images from capturing how much aircraft equipment had been destroyed, they dragged other plane zones they'd already stripped for parts over to the spots where the original planes had burned. So it would look like, no, the plane is still here, ha ha ha. Yeah, Just imagine if Hitler had taken the podium and started saying that the damned Soviet Union and the Allies were striking his troops and equipment. How could that be? I attacked them and now they're burning my equipment. How dare they? The question of a personal meeting between Putin and Zelensky has never been on the table in any practical sense. That was Ushakov who added that. Well, we weren't planning to meet with Zelensky, and we still aren't. It's clear that the policy of ignoring Zelensky, sending the signal that he is not a real player for the Kremlin, is just another new wave after every painful blow to that bold scum's backside. Putin will squeal every time saying, I don't want to deal with him, get him out of here, I won't talk to him, he offends me, and so on. That's how it goes. It's an attempt to humiliate, to devalue, including achievements and public ones at that. You have to admit, Operation Pautina is excellent, brilliant. Well, I don't know, maybe there have been some similar operations recently. Let me know if you can think of any, but to me, this is just, and at the same time, it's also a form of insurance. In other words, Putin is insuring himself against a direct dialogue because he could get cornered. And Ushakov also commented on the conversation between Putin and Trump. Look, here's a little gem for you. Putin told Trump about Kyiv's attempts to disrupt Russian-Ukrainian negotiations. He accused Ukraine of attacking civilian targets. So, remember this. A drone strike intelligent, high precision on Russian planes, according to them, is considered a straight-up terrorist attack. But a ballistic missile strike on Ukrainian cities that apparently is not considered an attempt to disrupt negotiations. So, and most importantly, I'm sure Trump just nodded along in agreement. Yes. I think Putin also talked about something else, He, understanding Trump's profile, says, just imagine, what if someone attacked you? Some small-time players, you and I, we're the ones who decide in this world who belongs to whom. But imagine if they started doing that to you, how would you react? What if they burned your newest planes? How would you respond to that? So I'm sure the old man's rambling went along those lines. Also, look, Putin and Trump didn't discuss the draft text of the Russia-Ukraine memorandums. But really, why? Because if they did, they'd have to admit that Russia's demands are absolutely impossible to fulfill. And then they'd have to talk about sanctions. But Trump doesn't want that. Narcissus, classic. Don't want to, what, you don't like it? That doesn't exist. That's it. I'm hiding. I don't see. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. I only want to talk about good things. Praise me. Whoever praises me best will get this delicious candy. And of course, the main narrative being pushed is Ukraine is the one hindering the negotiations. And by the way, according to the Kremlin, according to Ushakov, Trump agrees with this. It's an attempt to portray Putin as a deceived partner who was simply forced to disrupt peace even though he wanted it so much. Why doesn't he agree to a ceasefire? No one knows. We're not going to talk about that. That's a bad topic. And, I think that Putin himself doesn't want a scenario where Trump completely washes his hands of the situation. In other words, Europe is already starting to roll up its sleeves, realizing that this guy could walk away from the table at any moment. Yesterday, I talked about the drone coalition and about how the UK is going to supply us with 100,000 UAVs of various types. That is, they are starting to increase their defense spending. In short, no one is going to leave Ukraine one-on-one. And taking this opportunity, I always want to say a huge thank you to those who are helping Ukraine. But it's important to maintain the illusion that Trump is about to impose some sanctions, that he'll somehow force Putin to do something just to get through this summer and autumn. Then at least Putin will have run out of equipment and supplies. And I specifically got a report here on the overall losses, because I'm about to get to that. Putin is not prepared for this kind of exhausting war. He's not ready. They can have Medinsky or Medvedev or whoever else say as much as they want. We can fight endlessly. No. OPEC plus countries are increasing oil production. The price has already fallen below what they budgeted for. The total losses since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has lost more than 20,000 pieces of equipment. And according to forecasts, Russia will have enough equipment, considering the depletion of combat-ready units, only until the end of this year, or at most, for another year. That's it. What is he going to fight with after that? And how will it be promoted? What will he use to launch an offensive? And by that time, believe me, there will be Web 2 and Web 3 and Web 4 and everything else. There will be a Hive, whatever you want, and there will be an Aura 5. They'll get everything. And by the way, some great news this morning regarding how the Russians are preparing for this massive strike. An Iskander launcher was destroyed and 2 were damaged. In other words, they struck the positions of the 26th Missile Brigade. These are the Iskanders that were already being brought out for the massive strike. That is, according to our intelligence, they were preparing to strike Kyiv with these very launchers. So this is absolutely normal. Putin says, they burned my planes, now I will deliver a strike of retribution. And Trump, well, yes, but where is, after the last massive strike, Trump called Putin insane, crazy. Why is he shelling cities, why is he killing people, and so on. And now what? Just how lacking in empathy do you have to be? Zero. Zilch compassion. Oh, did I say that? Ha ha ha. Next question. It's just infuriating. Well, thanks to my slight schizoid tendencies and my German roots, and a huge thanks to the Baltic countries. But Trump's behavior just infuriates me. It's simply disgusting, to be honest. Elon Musk also got fed up with Trump and called on Congress to reject the vote on Trump's government budget proposal. So he's already started playing hard in the opposition, and indirectly, he's definitely weakening Trump. You know, there's Elon Musk, just Elon Musk with Tesla, that's one thing. But Elon Musk, with a net worth of 200 billion, with his influence including over the Republican side with Twitter, the social network X, overall, that's a much more serious matter. In the end, I think Trump, in his usual style, wanting to get something out of everyone and outsmart everyone, will end up making a huge number of enemies. And look, here's an interesting piece of news. The deputy of Marco Rubio, and Marco Rubio heads the State Department, which is the equivalent of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So Marco Rubio's deputy has some relatives who are real Putin supporters. It turns out that Darren Beatty, Rubio's deputy, is married to a certain Yulia Kirilova. She is the niece of the former vice governor of the Nenets Autonomous Okrug, Sergei Chernikov, who is also known as Russia's vodka king. So it turns out that's how he participated in Putin's campaign. And this very Beatty, let me remind you, is, well, the deputy minister of foreign affairs, and he's actually responsible for international policy, among other things. And this Beatty put in incredible effort to disband the department that was fighting against Russian disinformation. He also, by the way, expressed admiration for Putin even after the invasion of Ukraine. So I thought, let me check what he actually said. Maybe he's a good person, as they say. Maybe the guy's not so bad. But it turned out he was talking about NATO. NATO poses a much greater threat to American freedom than Putin ever has. Have you ever seen anything like this? Look at that. Well done. He memorized the talking points. 2 months before the full-scale invasion, Beatty wrote on X, "Just imagine the whining from the globalist American empire if Putin invades Ukraine. I love it when our national security bureaucrats fail." You think that's very funny, don't you, Mr. Beatty? He openly praised Putin, calling him brave and strong, claiming that Putin has done more to advance conservative positions in the US than anyone else. Well, listen, there's a booth over there next to Steven Seagal where Putin can throw you a bone too. Go ahead, you love Putin, you praise Putin, try living for a month in Syzran. The Syzran Disneyland is waiting for you with open arms. And, well, I think some people here just aren't pushing hard enough for something like that, you know what for. Well, he was actually an official under President Trump during his very first term in office, but he was ultimately fired back in 2018 for participating in a white nationalist conference. Quite a multifaceted character. These are the kinds of people who work at the State Department. And you know what drew attention to him? He showed an almost insane eagerness to get access to classified documents related to the Russian Federation. That alone made him look suspicious. Why was he so eager, I wonder? Anyway, friends, by the way, check this. Here's a little attention test for you. Check which channel you're watching me on. It's very easy to just look under video channel. My official channel is called Boris Tizenghausen. You might be watching me on different channels, it happens. Many people put videos on their site. I recommend you subscribe to the official channel. It will only take you a few seconds. Just type Boris Tizenghausen into the YouTube search and my channel will come up with a subscribe button. Click it and that's it. We're together now. Zelensky is once again the bad guy for us. Trump considers Zelensky a bad guy who is pushing the world toward nuclear war, according to the New York Times, citing Trump's advisors. However, while he is irritated by Putin, his main hostility is directed first and foremost at Zelensky. Trump has repeatedly told his aides that Zelensky is a bad guy who is pushing the world to the brink. It's not Putin who's pushing, but Zelensky. Basically, Trump is annoyed that he has to defend someone, and that gets in the way of him doing business with the one who attacked. In other words, he is choosing the less financially advantageous option. I think he himself would like to have the ability to attack whoever he wants and take whatever he wants. It seems to me that Trump would really love to have Putin's tools to clear out the information space, kick the opposition out of the country, break the law, be president for as many terms as he wants, and at the same time exercise the right to I want Greenland. Hand it over or else I'll go to war. Give it to me. Making America great again at the expense of humiliating and subjugating the weak, well, that's not much. But if you made America great by fighting an aggressive, powerful, armed opponent now, that's greatness. But trying to, snatch Greenland, well, that's not how you make history. True, Trump previously believed that statements about his very, very good relationship with the Russian president would help quickly put an end to the war. However, later he learned from his own bitter experience what the limits of American influence are, the newspaper writes. Seriously? And one more piece of news, it's very telling. Recently, a statement from a prominent figure who is very close to Trump's inner circle, notably condemning the strike on Russian airfields, was released. The attack by Ukrainian drones has set the world on a path to escalation. Retired Air Force General Blade Holt told a Republican-leaning channel. And look at what he says. This is a very telling story. Never in my life have I been more concerned about global or national security than I am now. I understand that this is a tactical victory for the Ukrainians. There is a tactical victory, but they struck a third of the strategic bombers covered by the START treaty. There is not a single Russian in the armed forces who believes that Ukraine could have achieved this without the help of Western intelligence, including from our own country. Why isn't that the case? You shouldn't attribute the achievements of the security service to yourself. Look at that. He says, we're not saying anything, but maybe we had a hand in it. Everyone thinks we were involved to do that. That's Trump, of course. Trump is good at things like that. I'm the one who reconciled India and Pakistan while the Indian Foreign Ministry wasn't even anywhere near involved. You shouldn't do that. That means he's afraid. This retired general is afraid that now the Russian missile forces are targeting the coordinates of Paris, London, and Washington. This is a path to escalation. And in general, it's just blah, blah, blah. And it's scary. So I'm an officer with 27 years of service, and I can say that we are in a very, very dangerous place. Seriously? You? Over there? Across the big, beautiful ocean? Meanwhile, the Ukrainians were told by the US embassy, be careful. In the near future, Putin will strike at you, take revenge on you, and we'll just watch. Donald Trump, for example, most likely won't impose any sanctions. So yes, Ukrainians are in a very dangerous place. Those are frontline cities where KBs are flying in, demolishing entire buildings. They're in a very dangerous place. So what should be done to prevent further escalation? So that Putin simply can't wage war, so that Ukraine doesn't strike further at the nuclear triad, and so that we're not in such a dangerous place, according to the general. And so that people across the ocean are nervous, worrying that Putin might suddenly turn on them. Exactly. Impose sanctions. This isn't a military matter. It's a pre-war vice economic sanctions. Just. No? So what about the sanctions? How he will most likely for sure retaliate now, strike back. What's going on with the sanctions? Where are the voices? Although there are voices being heard, I talked about this in the previous program. A third of Putin's nuclear triad has been destroyed. What will he do now? Will he strike London, Paris, and Washington? What do you think? No, he will strike Ukraine just as he did yesterday, just as he did the day before, just as he has done since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. He will strike Ukraine, and after some time, his entire nuclear triad will be destroyed. And after some time, Ukraine will have the capability to launch many more drones. So how many times have we heard about these red lines from a retired general with 27 years of experience? The words of a retired general with 27 years of experience who still remembers real US presidents should have sounded a bit different, in my opinion. take down the baldy. To put it briefly, otherwise it's the era of, some great cowards. Pardon my French. When this war is written about in textbooks, some will be portrayed in a very unflattering light, and some will be those who helped Ukraine, who kept supporting and didn't abandon it. Those will find their place in history. But Ukraine, which is showing the whole world how one can and should stand up to a nuclear bully, will forever be written into the textbooks of world history. And Putin has already, in fact, lost this war. Called Trump and asked if there will be sanctions, if it's possible to strike Ukraine. So it turns out that now they even need to get approval from the US to strike Ukraine. Shameful,